The Montana sunset painted the sky in streaks of burnt orange and deep purple as Sarah Mitchell wiped the last smear of engine grease from her calloused hands. The rag came away black, just like it did every evening at 6 o'clock when she closed Mitchell's auto repair for the day. 12 years. 12 years of this same routine in Millbrook, a speck of a town with 3,200 souls, one main street, and more pickup trucks than people. She stood in the open bay door of her garage, breathing in the crisp autumn air that carried the scent of pine from the surrounding mountains. To anyone watching, she was just another small-town mechanic finishing another honest day's work. That's exactly what she wanted them to see. "Night, Sarah," called out Tommy Brewster, walking past with his golden retriever. "Thanks again for fixing the alternator. Runs like a dream now." "Anytime, Tommy. Give Sadie a pat for me," Sarah replied with a practiced smile, the kind that reached her eyes but didn't quite touch whatever lived deeper inside her. Tommy waved and continued down the sidewalk, his dog trotting happily beside him. Sarah watched them go, her smile fading as she pulled down the heavy garage door with a metallic clang that echoed off the surrounding buildings. The sound always made her flinch, just slightly. After all these years, sudden noises still triggered something primal in her nervous system. Inside the garage, she locked the door, 3 separate deadbolts installed by her own hands. Excessive for Millbrook, where most people didn't even lock their front doors. But Sarah Mitchell wasn't most people, even if the town didn't know it. The garage smelled like motor oil, old tires, and the industrial cleaner she used on the concrete floors. Tools hung in precise order on pegboards, wrenches arranged by size, sockets in their proper trays. Everything had its place. Order was control, and control was survival. Sarah climbed the narrow wooden stairs at the back of the garage that led to her apartment above. It was modest, 1 bedroom, a small kitchen, a living room with a couch she'd bought at a yard sale 8 years ago. The walls were bare except for a single landscape painting of the Montana wilderness she'd picked up at a local art fair. No family photos, no personal mementos, nothing that told a story about who she'd been before Millbrook. She microwaved leftover pasta and ate it standing at the kitchen counter, looking out the window at Main Street below. The lights were coming on in Rosa's diner across the way. Tuesday night meant meatloaf special, and she could see the usual crowd gathering. Mayor Jim Hartley, the Johnsons who ran the hardware store, old Pete Martinez arguing about something, probably politics, with whoever would listen. This was her life now, predictable, safe, invisible. After dinner, Sarah changed into worn sweats and a tank top. She tied her dark blonde hair back into a tight ponytail and descended the stairs again, this time bypassing the main garage floor and heading to a smaller room in the back, officially her storage area, but it served a different purpose when the sun went down. She cleared a space on the concrete floor and began her routine. Stretches first, methodical and precise. Then shadow boxing, her fists cutting through the air with practiced accuracy. Kicks, high, low, sweeping. Combinations she drilled into her muscle memory years ago at a different life in a different place when she'd been a different person entirely. Sweat dripped down her face as she worked through the sequences. 1 hour every night without fail. She told herself it was just exercise, staying fit, but deep down she knew the truth. She was maintaining skills she prayed she'd never need to use again. By 9 o'clock she was back upstairs, showered and exhausted, but before bed she performed one final ritual. Sarah opened her bedroom closet and pushed aside the winter coats she rarely wore. Behind them, built into the wall, was a small hidden compartment she'd constructed during her first week in Millbrook. Inside, a go bag. She unzipped it and checked the contents, just like she did every Tuesday and Friday. $20,000 in cash divided into different denominations. 3 fake IDs, each with a different name and backstory she'd memorized. A burner phone still in its packaging. A Glock 19 with 2 magazines. A thumb drive with encrypted files. A change of clothes in neutral colors. energy bars and water purification tablets. Everything she'd need to disappear in 60 seconds. Sarah zipped the bag closed and returned it to its hiding place, her heart beating a little faster than normal, like it always did when she confronted this remnant of paranoia. 12 years in Millbrook without incident. 12 years of peace. Maybe she really had escaped. Maybe the people who'd wanted her dead had forgotten about her, moved on to other targets, other problems. Maybe. She climbed into bed and turned off the light, but sleep didn't come easily. It never did. In the darkness, Sarah's mind drifted to the life she'd left behind, the laboratory, the research, the discovery that had changed everything. The face of her mentor, Dr. Patricia Chen, smiling in her memory, unaware that in 3 days she'd be dead, her car forced off a bridge in what the police called an accident. Sarah had known better, she'd run. And she'd been running ever since, even if it looked like standing still in a Montana town where everyone knew her as the reliable mechanic who could fix anything with an engine, but never talked about her past. The people of Millbrook had filled in the blanks themselves over the years. Bad divorce, some speculated. Family tragedy, others whispered. Maybe she'd lost a child or fled an abusive relationship. They respected her privacy, accepted her silence, and welcomed her into their community with the kind of gentle kindness that small towns excel at. If they only knew the truth. Outside her window, Millbrook settled into its quiet Tuesday night rhythm. Dogs barked in the distance. A car drove slowly down Main Street. The neon sign at Rosa's Diner flickered off at 10 o'clock sharp, like clockwork. Sarah finally felt herself drifting toward sleep. That vulnerable space between consciousness and dreams, where the walls she'd built around herself started to crack. She didn't know that at that very moment, 300 miles away, a photograph was being uploaded to a database. A photograph of her, taken by a traveling journalist 3 weeks ago, her face partially visible as she worked under the hood of a Ford F-150, her expression focused and unguarded. She didn't know that facial recognition software was analyzing that image, comparing it to thousands of missing persons, wanted criminals, and persons of interest. She didn't know that in approximately 4 hours, that software would ping with a 97% match to a woman who'd vanished 15 years ago. A chemical engineer named Dr. Sarah Volkov, wanted for questioning in connection with the theft of classified weapons research. She didn't know that her quiet life was about to shatter like the engine parts she reassembled every day. For now, Sarah Mitchell slept, dreaming of Montana sunsets and a life she'd almost convinced herself was real. But morning was coming. And with it, 3 black SUVs. Marcus Reed had been a journalist for 23 years, and he'd learned that the best stories weren't found in press conferences or official statements. They were hidden in the margins, in the forgotten places where real America still existed. That's what brought him to Millbrook, Montana, on a crisp October afternoon, his camera bag slung over his shoulder and a deadline looming for Southwest magazine. His assignment was simple: capture the dying breed of small-town America. The mom-and-pop diners, the main streets with more vacant storefronts than open ones, the people who stayed when everyone else left for the cities. It was a story he'd written a dozen times before, but editors kept asking for it, and readers kept clicking. Marcus spent 3 days in Millbrook, photographing the usual suspects: elderly men playing checkers outside the hardware store, the faded welcome sign at the town limits, the single-screen movie theater that only opened on weekends. But it was the auto repair shop that caught his attention. Mitchell's Auto Repair sat on the corner of Main and 5th, a squat building with bay doors that opened onto the street. The sign was hand-painted, probably decades old, with a phone number that still had only 7 digits. Marcus watched for 20 minutes as a woman worked on a lifted pickup truck, her movements efficient and confident. She wore faded coveralls, her hair pulled back, grease smeared on her forearm. There was something about her focus, the way she moved with absolute certainty, that made Marcus raise his camera, He didn't ask permission. Candid shots were always more authentic. Click. She was reaching for a wrench. Click. Bent over the engine, problem-solving. Click. Her face partially visible, caught in profile, backlit by the afternoon sun streaming through the garage. Perfect. Marcus didn't bother to get her name. She was just part of the landscape, another element in his portrait of small-town resilience. He uploaded his photos that evening from his motel room in the next county over and moved on to his next assignment, already forgetting about the mechanic in Millbrook. The article ran 3 weeks later under the headline "The Last Main Streets: Finding Hope in America's Forgotten Towns." It was well received, shared on social media, featured in the magazine's email newsletter. The photo of Sarah working in her garage appeared on page 4 with a caption that read, "A mechanic repairs a truck in Millbrook, Montana, population 3,200. That's where it should have ended. A forgettable image in a forgettable article that would be lining bird cages within a month. But nothing ever really disappears anymore. In a secure office building in Washington, D.C., 3 time zones away from Millbrook, an automated system was doing what it did every hour of every day: scanning. The FBI's facial recognition database continuously crawled through newly published images, social media posts, news articles, public event photos, anything with a face that could be analyzed. Southwest Magazine's online edition was indexed at 3:47 a.m. Eastern Time. By 4:12 a.m., every photograph in the article had been processed, faces extracted and compared against the database of wanted persons, missing persons, and persons of interest. 42 faces were identified with high confidence. 41 were ordinary citizens with no flags in the system. The 42nd face triggered an alert. The system flagged the image and sent an encrypted notification to Agent Thomas Brennan's secure tablet. The alert woke him at 4:15 a.m., the distinctive chime cutting through his dreamless sleep. 15 years with the FBI had trained him to go from unconscious to fully alert in seconds. He grabbed the tablet from his nightstand, his wife stirring beside him but not waking. The screen glowed in the darkness. Possible match VOLKOV, Sarah confidence 97.3% priority. High. Brennan's pulse quickened. He'd been assigned to the Volkov case 9 years ago, inheriting it from an agent who'd retired after hitting dead end after dead end. Sarah Volkov, the chemical engineer who'd vanished 15 years ago with classified bioweapon research, leaving behind a dead mentor and a trail that went cold at the Canadian border. Most people assumed she'd died, her body never recovered. The file had been gathering dust, checked periodically but never actively pursued. Resources were limited, and missing persons cases from 15 years ago didn't get priority unless new evidence emerged. This was new evidence. Brennan climbed out of bed, careful not to wake his wife, and carried the tablet to his home office. He pulled up the full report, his eyes scanning the details. The photograph showed a woman in mechanic's coveralls, partially in profile, working on a truck engine. The facial recognition had locked onto the visible portion of her face, the angle of her jaw, the distance between her eyes, the distinctive shape of her cheekbone. He opened the original case file and compared the magazine photo to Dr. Sarah Volkov's employee ID from Tecton Defense Systems, taken 16 years ago. The woman in the ID wore professional attire, her hair styled, makeup applied, a practiced smile for the camera. She looked nothing like the grease-stained mechanic in Montana. But the bone structure was identical. Brennan zoomed in on both images, comparing every detail. The system had been right. This was her. After 15 years of searching, Sarah Volkov had been found by accident, captured in a throwaway photograph for a regional magazine feature. He checked the article's caption and location details. Millbrook, Montana. Population 3,200. The business appeared to be Mitchell's Auto Repair based on the visible signage in the photo. Mitchell's, probably not her real name but close enough to her original initials, SM, Sarah Mitchell. People on the run often stuck close to their original identity, unable to fully let go of who they'd been. By 5:30 a.m., Brennan was at FBI headquarters, pulling everything he could find on Millbrook, Montana and Mitchell's auto repair. Property records showed the business was owned by a Sarah J. Mitchell, purchased 12 years ago with cash. No credit history before that date. Driver's license issued by Montana 12 years ago. No previous addresses, no employment history, no paper trail before her appearance in Millbrook. It was a ghost identity, professionally constructed but not quite perfect. At 7:00 a.m., Brennan briefed his supervisor, Assistant Director Catherine Morrison. She listened in silence as he presented the evidence, her expression unreadable. "After 15 years, why does this matter?" Morrison asked. "The company she stole from was prosecuted and dissolved. The people who were selling secrets are either dead or in prison. What's the operational value in pursuing this now?" Brennan had anticipated the question. He pulled up another file, this one marked with the highest classification level. 2 weeks ago, intelligence intercepted communications from a terrorist cell operating in the United States. They referenced a chemical compound by its research designation, VX7. That compound was developed by Dr. Sarah Volkov at Tekton Defense Systems. It was never supposed to exist. According to official records, the research was destroyed. Morrison leaned forward, but she took it with her. She took everything. The only complete records of VX7, its formula, synthesis process, and most critically, its antidote, exist in Sarah Volkov's head. The hard drives were wiped, the paper files shredded. Tekton made sure of it when they went under investigation. And now someone's trying to weaponize it. Not trying. According to Signals Intelligence, they have a viable sample. They're planning deployment within 2 to 3 weeks. Target unknown, but we're looking at potential casualties in the thousands if deployed in a populated area. Morrison was quiet for a long moment, staring at the photograph of Sarah Mitchell working in her garage, unaware that her past had just caught up to her future. "How certain are we this is her?" 97.3% facial recognition match. The background check shows a classic false identity, and the timing, she disappeared exactly when VX7 was stolen. It's her. "Then bring her in, quietly. No local law enforcement, no media. I want a team in Montana by tomorrow morning." Brennan nodded. "Already assembling. 3 vehicles, 6 agents. We'll have her location secured before she knows we're there." That same morning, 300 miles away in Millbrook, Sarah Mitchell opened her garage at 7 o'clock sharp, the same as every Wednesday for 12 years. The autumn air was crisp, the sky painfully blue. She started a pot of coffee in the small office and began organizing her workload for the day. Mrs. Henderson's Buick needed an oil change. The high school was sending over their auto shop class at 2 o'clock. Tyler Chen, her apprentice, would arrive at 8. It was a normal Wednesday, predictable, safe. But as Sarah bent to retrieve a socket wrench from her toolbox, a silver sedan drove slowly past on Main Street. The driver's face was hidden behind sunglasses, but his head turned toward the garage, watching. Sarah straightened, wrench in hand, a cold finger of unease trailing down her spine. The sedan disappeared around the corner. Probably nothing, just a tourist passing through, or someone lost looking for directions. But that night the sedan was back, parked across the street from her apartment. And the night after that. Sarah didn't sleep. She sat in the darkness by her window, watching the car, her go-bag packed and ready by the door. Somewhere deep inside, beneath 12 years of careful reconstruction, Dr. Sarah Volkov was waking up. And she knew what came next. Sarah didn't sleep Tuesday night. She sat in the darkness of her apartment, the Glock 19 from her go-bag resting on her lap, watching the silver sedan that had been parked across the street for 3 consecutive nights. The streetlight cast an orange glow across Main Street, and she could see the silhouette of someone inside the vehicle, unmoving, patient. They were watching her, waiting for something. At 2:37 a.m., the sedan finally drove away, its taillights disappearing into the Montana darkness. Sarah exhaled slowly, her finger easing off the trigger guard. She should run. Every instinct screamed at her to grab the go-bag, slip out the back, and disappear into the wilderness she'd spent 12 years learning to navigate. But something kept her frozen in place. Exhaustion, maybe, or the crushing weight of running for 15 years, always looking over her shoulder, never truly free. Part of her was tired of surviving. Part of her wanted it to finally be over, one way or another. She was still sitting by the window when the sun rose at 6:43 a.m., painting the sky in shades of pink and gold. Wednesday morning in Millbrook. Rosa's Diner would open at 7. The school buses would start their routes at 7:30. Tommy Brewster would walk his dog past her garage at 8:15, like clockwork. Normal, predictable, safe. Except it wasn't, not anymore. Sarah forced herself to stand, her joints stiff from sitting motionless for hours. She made coffee with shaking hands, the familiar ritual doing nothing to calm the adrenaline flooding her system. She should eat something. She should shower. She should pretend everything was fine. Instead, she strapped the Glock into a concealed holster at the small of her back, covered it with an oversized flannel shirt, and descended the stairs to her garage. The coffee mug was halfway to her lips when she heard them. 3 vehicles, heavy engines moving fast. Sarah's heart stopped. She set the mug down carefully on her workbench and walked to the bay door, her hand instinctively moving toward the weapon at her back. Through the grimy windows, she could see them approaching, 3 black Chevy Suburbans with tinted windows, the kind of vehicles that screamed federal government. They weren't trying to be subtle anymore. The SUVs pulled up in perfect formation, blocking all 3 exits from her property, one in front, one at the side alley, one covering the back. Military precision, professional tactics. These weren't local cops or private investigators. This was the end. Sarah's coffee mug slipped from nerveless fingers and shattered on the concrete floor, brown liquid spreading across the oil-stained ground like blood. The sound echoed in the cavernous garage, final and irreversible. The doors of all 3 SUVs opened simultaneously. 6 people emerged, 5 men and 1 woman, all wearing dark suits and the kind of sunglasses that hid their eyes and their intentions. They moved with coordinated efficiency, hands near their hips where weapons would be holstered. The lead agent was tall, maybe 45, with graying temples and the bearing of someone who'd been doing this for decades. He approached slowly, deliberately, his hands raised and visible in a gesture of non-aggression. But Sarah noticed the other 5 agents had fanned out, covering angles, blocking escape routes. She was trapped. "Ms. Mitchell," the lead agent called out, stopping about 15 feet from the garage entrance. "My name is Agent Thomas Brennan. I'm with the Federal Bureau of Investigation. I need you to step out slowly, keep your hands where I can see them." Sarah's throat was dry. Her pulse hammered in her ears. 12 years of peace, ending on a Wednesday morning while the rest of Millbrook ate breakfast and prepared for another ordinary day. She could draw the Glock. She was fast, trained, and desperate. She might take down 2, maybe 3 of them before they returned fire. But then what? She'd be dead or in custody, and either way, Sarah Mitchell would cease to exist. "I know you're armed," Brennan continued, his voice calm, almost sympathetic. "I know you're evaluating your options, but I need you to listen carefully. We're not here to arrest you. We need your help." That made Sarah pause. Her hand, which had been inching toward her weapon, froze. "We need your help, Dr. Volkov." The name hit her like a physical blow. Dr. Sarah Volkov. The identity she'd buried 15 years ago, the person she'd tried so desperately hard to forget. Hearing it spoken aloud after so many years of silence made something crack inside her chest. Slowly moving like she was underwater, Sarah stepped out of the garage into the morning sunlight. Her hands were raised, visible, non-threatening. The 5 other agents tensed, ready to react, but Brennan held up a hand, keeping them back. "How long have you known?" Sarah asked, her voice rough from lack of sleep and rising panic. "3 days. A photograph in Southwest Magazine. Facial recognition flagged you." Brennan took a careful step closer. "I need you to remove your weapon slowly, 2 fingers, place it on the ground, then step back." Sarah complied, moving with deliberate care. The Glock clicked against the concrete. She stepped back, feeling suddenly naked without it. "Sarah Volkov," Brennan said, and this time it sounded less like an accusation and more like a sad acknowledgement. "Chemical engineer, formerly employed by Tecton Defense Systems. Disappeared 15 years ago after the death of your mentor, Dr. Patricia Chen, and the theft of classified research materials related to Project Vanguard. Specifically, the development of a binary chemical weapon designated VX-7. Each word was a nail in the coffin of her carefully constructed life. Across the street, Sarah could see curtains moving in windows. People were waking up, noticing the federal vehicles, the agents, the spectacle unfolding on their quiet main street. "Dr. Chen's death wasn't an accident," Sarah said quietly. "It wasn't a question." "No, it wasn't, and you knew that, which is why you ran." Brennan pulled a tablet from inside his jacket, moving slowly so as not to spook her. "We've known for years that Tecton was selling research to foreign entities. Your mentor discovered it. They killed her for it. You were next on the list, so you took everything you could and disappeared. Smart move. Kept you alive. For 15 years I've been waiting for someone to find me." Sarah's hands were still raised, but her voice was steady now. "Waiting for the people who killed Patricia to finish the job, and now you're here. So what happens now? Arrest? Witness protection? Or do I just disappear into a black site somewhere?" Brennan shook his head. "None of the above. 2 weeks ago, NSA intercepted communications from a domestic terrorist cell. They referenced by name. They have a sample, Dr. Volkov. Someone kept your research alive, and now it's in the hands of people who want to use it." The world seemed to tilt sideways. Sarah's knees went weak. "That's impossible. Tecton destroyed everything. The files, the samples, the synthesis protocols. They destroyed the records, but they didn't destroy the only person who could recreate it from memory." Brennan's eyes were intense, boring into hers. "You're the only person alive who knows the complete formula, the synthesis process, and most critically, the antidote. The terrorists have VX-7, but they don't have the full picture. They're going to deploy it anyway, probably within 2 weeks. Intelligence suggests a major U.S. city, Chicago, Denver, maybe Houston." Sarah's mind was racing, calculating. Was designed to be aerosolized, dispersed through HVAC systems. In a dense urban environment, mortality rate would be catastrophic. 70% fatality within 6 hours of exposure. No existing antidote in any CDC stockpile. She'd created it, her research, her calculations, her formulas. "Casualties," she whispered. "Conservative estimate, 5,000 to 8,000 dead, tens of thousands more with permanent neurological damage." Brennan lowered the tablet. "We need you to help us stop it. We need you to recreate the antidote from memory and help us develop a detection method so we can find their stockpile before they deploy." Sarah's vision blurred. She thought of Millbrook, of Rosa and Tommy and Tyler, of the high school kids she taught on Tuesday afternoons, of the simple, quiet life she'd built from the ruins of who she used to be. She thought of Chicago, of families having breakfast in their apartments, workers boarding the L train, students heading to class at Northwestern, none of them knowing that death could be pumped through their air conditioning at any moment. She thought of Dr. Patricia Chen, her mentor, her friend, dying alone on a rain-slicked road because she tried to do the right thing. If I cooperate, Sarah said slowly, my identity becomes public record. The people who killed Patricia. Most of them are dead or in prison. But yes, you'll be exposed. And yes, there are still loose ends. Dr. Vincent Hale, your former supervisor at Tecton, was never apprehended. He's the one who orchestrated the sales to foreign buyers. He's the most likely source for how this terrorist cell obtained. Hale, the name tasted like poison. He's the one who killed Patricia. We believe so, yes. He's been off-grid for 14 years. Multiple international warrants, suspected ties to several foreign intelligence services. If he finds out you're alive and cooperating, he'll come for me, Sarah finished. She lowered her hand slowly. So those are my options. Stay silent and let thousands die, or cooperate and paint a target on my back. Brennan's expression softened. I know it's not fair. I know you've already paid a price for doing the right thing once, but you're the only one who can stop this. 24 hours. That's how long I can give you to decide. Behind her, Sarah heard footsteps. She turned to see Rosa Martinez standing at the edge of the scene, her face pale with shock. Behind Rosa, more townspeople were gathering. Mayor Hartley, the Johnsons from the hardware store, Tyler Chen clutching his motorcycle helmet. They'd heard everything. Sarah looked at Agent Brennan, at the federal vehicles blocking her garage, at the life she'd built crumbling around her like the shattered coffee mug still spreading across her floor. 24 hours, she repeated. But they both knew she'd already made her choice. Agent Brennan set up a mobile command center in Sarah's garage. Within an hour, the bay doors were closed, blackout curtains hung over the windows, and sophisticated computer equipment hummed on folding tables where she usually kept her socket wrenches. The other 5 agents formed a perimeter around the property, keeping curious townspeople at a distance while Sarah's world imploded in private. She sat on an overturned oil drum, still wearing her grease-stained flannel shirt, feeling like a stranger in her own space. Brennan had given her coffee, real coffee from a thermos, not the burnt sludge she usually made, and now he was spreading photographs across her workbench like a dealer laying out cards in a game where the stakes were measured in thousands of lives. This was taken 6 days ago in Frankfurt, Brennan said, pointing to a surveillance photo of 2 men meeting in what looked like an industrial warehouse. The man on the left is Dmitry Volkov, no relation to you, we checked. Russian national, known arms dealer. The man on the right is Ahmed Nassar, Egyptian-American, Ph.D. in chemistry from MIT, radicalized 3 years ago after his family was killed in a drone strike he blamed on U.S. foreign policy. Sarah leaned forward, studying the image. Nassar was young, maybe 30, with the haunted eyes of someone who'd lost everything and replaced it with purpose, however twisted. Nassar has the technical knowledge to weaponize VX-7, she asked. Not perfectly. NSA intercepted encrypted communications between Nassar and an unknown party. They're calling it the breath of God. They have a sample, we don't know how much, but their synthesis is incomplete. They're missing key stabilization compounds, which means their version is crude, unpredictable, and possibly even more lethal than what you originally designed. Brennan pulled up another image on his tablet, this one a chemical structure, incomplete, with gaps where crucial molecular chains should be. Sarah's trained eye immediately spotted the errors, the dangerous omissions that would make the compound unstable and horrifically effective. Jesus, she whispered. Without the stabilizers, the compound won't disperse evenly. It'll create concentration pockets. Some areas will get lethal doses, others will get just enough to cause permanent brain damage without killing. It's worse than death. Exactly, and they're planning to deploy it somewhere in the American heartland within 14 days. We've identified 3 possible targets based on chatter and movements of known associates. Brennan swiped to show 3 city profiles: Chicago, Denver, and Houston. Major population centers. Nassar has connections in all 3 cities. We're running surveillance, but we can't evacuate entire cities on a hunch. We need to stop this at the source." Sarah stood abruptly, packing the confined space. Her boots crunched over the shattered coffee mug she still hadn't cleaned up, grinding ceramic into smaller pieces, like her life being pulverized into dust. "What exactly do you need from me?" "3 things. First, recreate the complete formula from memory so we know exactly what we're dealing with. Second, develop a detection method, something portable that can identify in air samples. Third, synthesize the antidote so we can stockpile it in target cities and treat victims if deployment occurs before we can stop them." "That's months of work. You're giving me 14 days. "I'm giving you 5 days in a secure facility with a full team of scientists and unlimited resources. After that, we need the detection method operational so field teams can start sweeping potential target locations." Sarah stopped packing and faced him directly. "And in exchange for saving thousands of lives, I get what? Witness protection. A new identity in another small town where I spend another 15 years looking over my shoulder." Brennan's expression was unreadable. "Full immunity from prosecution for the theft of classified materials. Legal validation of your Sarah Mitchell identity. You can keep living here if you want, under your real legal name. And yes, protection. We'll station agents here, set up monitoring, make sure Vincent Hale or anyone else from your past can't touch you." "You can't promise that. Hale has been ghost for 14 years. If he finds out I'm alive and cooperating, he won't send hired muscle. He'll come himself, and he'll burn this entire town to the ground just to get to me." "Then help us find him. You worked with Hale for 3 years. You know how he thinks, his patterns, his contacts." "I knew who he pretended to be," Sarah interrupted, her voice sharp. "The real Vincent Hale, the one who murdered Patricia and tried to sell bioweapons to terrorists. I never knew that man. None of us did." Brennan was quiet for a moment, letting her words hang in the air. Outside, Sarah could hear the murmur of voices. Townspeople gathered beyond the perimeter, probably demanding answers, probably scared. Rosa would be out there. Tyler. Mayor Hartley. All the people who'd welcomed a stranger into their community and never asked too many questions. What would they think of her now? Dr. Sarah Volkov, fugitive scientist, creator of weapons designed to kill on a mass scale. "I need to see the rest," Sarah said finally. "Everything you have. The intercepts, the intelligence reports, the threat assessment. I need to know exactly what I'm dealing with before I agree to anything." Brennan nodded and opened a secure laptop, entering credentials that took 3 different authentication methods. The screen filled with classified documents marked with so many warnings and classifications that Sarah felt her security clearance from 15 years ago reactivate like muscle memory. For the next 3 hours she read, and with each page, each intercepted communication, each grainy surveillance photo, the knot in her stomach tightened. The terrorist cell called themselves the Purification Front, a loose network of radicalized individuals united by their belief that America needed to be cleansed. Nassar was the technical mind, but he was working with at least 7 others, including a logistics expert who'd spent 5 years in the army before being dishonorably discharged, and a wealthy financier with connections to 3 different extremist organizations. They'd been planning this for 2 years, ever since obtaining a partial sample of VX7 from a source the NSA hadn't yet identified. Nassar had been attempting synthesis for 18 months, with limited success. His early attempts had been tested. Brennan showed her photos from a site in rural Nevada where they'd released a prototype on a population of livestock. 300 sheep dead within 4 hours, but the dispersion pattern was erratic, uncontrolled. They were still refining it. "How did they get the original sample?" Sarah asked, though part of her already knew the answer. "We believe Dr. Vincent Hale sold it to them. We intercepted a payment of $2.3 million from an account linked to the Purification Front's financier to a shell corporation in the Cayman Islands. The shell corp traces back to known associates of Hale." So Hale was still out there, still selling death to the highest bidder. And now his past work was about to kill thousands of Americans unless she stepped out of the shadows and became Dr. Sarah Volkov again. Brennan showed her one final image, a screenshot from a video the Purification Front had prepared for release after the attack. Nassar stood in front of a black flag, his face calm, almost serene. "By the time you see this," the transcription read, "hundreds will be dead and thousands more will be dying. This is the price of your government's sins. This is the breath of God cleansing the wicked, and this is only the beginning." Sarah closed the laptop, unable to look anymore. She thought about Chicago. She'd lived there briefly during grad school, knew its neighborhoods, its energy, its life. She imagined the compound pumped through the ventilation system of a high-rise office building, or released in the loop during rush hour, or dispersed through Navy Pier on a crowded summer day. Invisible, odorless, lethal. And she was the only person who could stop it. 24 hours, Brennan reminded her gently. "I know it's an impossible choice. I know what I'm asking you to give up." Sarah laughed, a bitter sound without humor. "Give up? I gave everything up 15 years ago. My career, my identity, my entire life. I rebuilt myself from nothing in this town, and now you're asking me to tear it all down again." "I'm asking you to save lives, that's all." She wanted to hate him for making it sound so simple, so noble. But Brennan wasn't wrong. 5,000 to 8,000 people, conservative estimate, he'd said. Fathers and mothers, children, elderly people, teenagers with their whole lives ahead of them. All of them dead because she'd chosen to stay hidden, chosen her own safety over their lives. But if she cooperated, she'd be exposed. Hale would find her. The people in Millbrook would be in danger just by proximity to her. And even if the FBI stopped this attack, there would be others. Once you became known as the person who could stop these threats, you never stopped being a target. "I need air," Sarah said abruptly. "I need to think." "You can't leave the perimeter." "I'm not running. I just need 5 minutes without feeling like the walls are closing in." Brennan studied her, then nodded. 5 minutes. Agent Morrison will accompany you." Sarah pushed open the side door and stepped into the alley, the female agent falling into step behind her. The Montana air was crisp and clean, carrying the scent of pine from the mountains. It was almost noon, the sun directly overhead, the day half gone already. She had until tomorrow morning to decide. 24 hours to choose between the life she'd built and the lives of thousands of strangers. But as Sarah stood in that alley, looking up at the mountains that had sheltered her for 12 years, she realized something fundamental. The choice had been made 15 years ago when she'd stolen that research instead of destroying it, when she'd run instead of fighting, when she'd chosen survival over justice. She'd been given a second chance to do the right thing. And this time she wouldn't run. Sarah turned back toward the garage, toward Agent Brennan and his classified files and his impossible mission. "I'll do it," she said, "but on my terms." By noon, half of Millbrook knew something was happening at Mitchell's Auto Repair. By 1 o'clock, everyone knew. Small towns operate on networks of communication more efficient than any social media algorithm. Phone trees, coffee shop gossip, the volunteer fire department's group chat, and Rosa Martinez's uncanny ability to know everything 30 seconds after it happens. Agent Brennan's 24-hour deadline was ticking away, but Sarah had made her decision. Now came the harder part, facing the people she'd been lying to for 12 years. "I want to tell them myself," Sarah said to Brennan, her voice steady despite the fear churning in her gut. "The town. They deserve to hear it from me, not from FBI press releases or news helicopters." Brennan looked skeptical. "That's not protocol. We need to maintain operational security." "They already know federal agents have surrounded my garage. They've been watching all morning. And in a town this size, secrets don't exist. By tomorrow, someone will have leaked something to the press, and then you'll have media swarming this place, compromising your precious security." Sarah crossed her arms. Let me do this my way. Give them the truth before the rumors destroy what little trust I have left. After a tense moment, Brennan nodded. 2 hours. You can address the town, but I'm limiting what details you can share. No specifics about the target cities, the terrorist cell, or operational timelines. Keep it general. Deal. Sarah asked Rosa Martinez to spread the word. Emergency town meeting at the diner, 6 o'clock sharp. In Millbrook, Rosa's word was law. If Rosa said everyone needed to be somewhere, everyone showed up. The next 4 hours were excruciating. Sarah sat in her converted garage command center, reviewing the classified files Brennan had shown her, committing details to memory while trying not to think about what she was about to do. Agent Morrison brought her a sandwich from Rosa's diner, turkey and Swiss, the same thing Sarah ordered every Tuesday, and the familiar taste made her throat tighten with unexpected emotion. This might be the last normal thing she experienced in Millbrook for a very long time, maybe forever. At 5:30, Sarah changed from her grease-stained work clothes into clean jeans and a simple blue sweater. She looked at herself in the mirror above her bathroom sink, the same mirror she'd looked into every morning for 12 years, the same face that had gradually relaxed from hypervigilance into something approaching peace. Dr. Sarah Volkov stared back at her now, no longer hidden behind the facade of small-town mechanic. Agent Brennan and 2 other agents accompanied her to Rosa's diner. The sun was setting, painting Main Street in shades of amber and crimson. Every parking spot along the street was filled. People had walked from blocks away, gathering in clusters, their faces worried and curious and afraid. Rosa's diner could seat maybe 60 people uncomfortably. At least 150 had crammed inside, spilling out onto the sidewalk, pressing against the windows. The familiar smell of coffee and Rosa's famous apple pie hung in the air, but nobody was eating. The usual warm buzz of conversation had been replaced by tense, whispered speculation. When Sarah walked through the door, the room fell silent. Every eye turned toward her. She saw familiar faces, Tommy Brewster with his wife Linda, Mayor Jim Hartley looking stern and official, the Johnson family from the hardware store, old Pete Martinez who taught her to fish in his pond 5 years ago. Tyler Chen stood near the back, his young face pale and uncertain. And Rosa, standing behind the counter with her arms crossed, her expression unreadable. Sarah's legs felt like water. Agent Brennan stood beside her, a subtle reminder of federal authority, but she'd asked him not to speak. This was her confession to make. "Thank you for coming," Sarah began, her voice barely above a whisper. She cleared her throat and tried again, louder. "I know you're all scared and confused. I know federal agents surrounding my garage isn't normal, even for Millbrook's standards of weird." A few nervous laughs rippled through the crowd. "I need to tell you something I should have told you 12 years ago when I first came to this town." Sarah's hands were shaking. She pressed them against her thighs. "My name isn't Sarah Mitchell. It is now legally, but it wasn't when I arrived here. My real name, my birth name, is Sarah Volkov." The silence deepened. She could see people leaning forward, hanging on every word. 15 years ago, I was a chemical engineer working for a defense contractor. I was young, ambitious, and stupid enough to believe that my research would only be used to protect people. I was developing a compound. She chose her words carefully, remembering Brennan's restrictions, something that could be weaponized. I didn't know it at the time. I thought I was working on defensive countermeasures. Sarah's voice cracked. She paused, gathering herself. "My mentor, a woman named Dr. Patricia Chen, discovered that our employer was selling our research to foreign buyers. She was going to report it. 3 days later, she died in what the police called a car accident. But it wasn't an accident. They killed her because she was going to expose them." Gasps echoed through the diner. Rosa's hand went to her mouth. "I knew I was next, so I stole all the evidence I could find. Research files, financial records, communications, and I ran. I disappeared. I became Sarah Mitchell and I came here to Millbrook because I thought no one would ever find me in a town so small it doesn't even show up on most maps. Jesus Christ, someone muttered. For 12 years I've been hiding, living a lie, and I told myself it was okay because I wasn't hurting anyone. I fixed your cars, I taught your kids about engines, I paid my taxes and volunteered at the school and tried to be a good neighbor. But I was always looking over my shoulder, always ready to run. Sarah's eyes found Tyler in the crowd. The boy looked devastated. 2 weeks ago, the FBI intercepted communications from a terrorist cell operating in the United States. They have access to the compound I developed, or a version of it. They're planning to use it to kill thousands of American citizens in a major city. The FBI needs my help to stop them, because I'm the only person alive who knows how to create an antidote and detect the compound before it's deployed. The room erupted, people talking over each other, voices raised in shock and fear and anger. Mayor Hartley stood up, demanding order, but the chaos continued until Rosa Martinez banged a metal spoon against a pot with such force that everyone jumped. "Let her finish," Rosa shouted. The room settled into uneasy silence again. "If I cooperate with the FBI," Sarah continued, "my identity becomes public. The people who killed my mentor, some of them are still out there. They'll know where I am, they'll know I'm alive, and they'll come for me." She looked around the room, meeting as many eyes as she could. "Which means they might come here, to Millbrook, and I cannot, put you all in danger just because I was too much of a coward to face my past 15 years ago." "So what are you saying?" Mayor Hartley asked, his voice gruff. "You're leaving?" Sarah nodded, her throat tight. "The FBI is taking me to a secure facility in Virginia. I'll work with them to stop the attack. After that," she shrugged helplessly. "I don't know, maybe witness protection. Maybe I disappear again somewhere new, but I can't come back here. I won't bring that danger to your doorstep." The silence that followed was crushing. Sarah could see the betrayal on some faces, the fear on others. She'd lied to these people for 12 years. They'd welcomed her, trusted her, treated her like family, and she'd repaid that trust with deception. Then Rosa Martinez stepped forward. "That's bullshit," Rosa said flatly. Sarah blinked. "What?" "I said that's bullshit. You're not going to sacrifice yourself and run away again just to protect us." Rosa turned to face the crowd. "This woman has been part of our community for 12 years. She fixed my husband's truck for free when we couldn't afford it. She taught my nephew how to change a tire. She sat with Linda Brewster when Linda's mother was dying, and she needed someone to talk to at 3 in the morning." Rosa's eyes blazed with fierce loyalty. So what if her name isn't really Sarah Mitchell? So what if she used to be some fancy scientist? The person we know, the person who's been our neighbor and our friend, that person is real. And we don't abandon our own just because things get complicated. "Rosa," Sarah tried to interrupt, but Rosa held up a hand. "You're going to Virginia. You're going to do whatever needs to be done to stop those terrorists. And then you're coming back here, to Millbrook, to your home, because this is where you belong." Tyler Chen pushed through the crowd, his young face determined. "I'll run the garage while you're gone. I know I'm still learning, but I can handle the basic stuff. Oil changes, tire rotations, inspections. We'll keep the business running until you get back." "Tyler, you're 19. And you trained me. You believed in me when everyone else thought I was just another screw-up kid headed nowhere." Tyler's voice was thick with emotion. "Let me do this for you." Mayor Hartley stood, clearing his throat. "I'll organize a security committee. Local volunteers to keep watch, report any suspicious activity. We're not helpless, small-town folk. Half the people in this room are veterans, hunters, or both. If anyone comes looking for trouble, they'll find it." One by one, people stood. Tommy Brewster offered to board up Sarah's apartment windows and install better locks. The Johnsons volunteered to maintain her property. Old Pete Martinez, who rarely spoke at town meetings, stood with tears in his eyes. My daughter died 10 years ago in Chicago, Pete said, his voice shaking. Overdose. She was 23 years old. If there's people out there planning to kill folks in Chicago and you can stop them. He wiped his eyes roughly. You do what you gotta do, and you come home when it's done. We'll be here. Sarah's vision blurred with tears. She'd spent 15 years believing she had to face everything alone, that trusting people meant putting them in danger, that love was a liability she couldn't afford. But these people, these stubborn, loyal, impossibly brave small-town people, weren't asking her permission to help. They were simply choosing to stand with her, consequences be damned. Rosa walked over and pulled Sarah into a fierce hug. "You're not alone anymore," she whispered. "You never were. We just needed you to trust us enough to tell the truth." Sarah hugged her back, unable to speak past the lump in her throat. Agent Brennan, who'd been standing quietly by the door, stepped forward. "Ms. Mitchell needs to leave for Virginia tomorrow morning at 0600. We have 5 days to prevent a catastrophic attack. I can't promise her safety, and I can't promise this town won't face consequences for her actions. But I can promise you that what she's about to do will save thousands of lives." Mayor Hartley nodded. "Then let's make sure she's got a home to come back to when she's done saving the world." The meeting dissolved into organized chaos as people volunteered for various tasks, made plans, exchanged phone numbers. Sarah stood in the center of it all, overwhelmed by the outpouring of support from people she'd lied to for 12 years. As the crowd finally began to disperse, Sarah realized something profound. She'd spent 15 years running from her past, but she'd accidentally built a future worth fighting for. And tomorrow, she'd fight for it with everything she had. The helicopter touched down at the secure facility at 4:37 a.m. Eastern Time. Sarah had barely slept during the flight from Montana, her mind already churning through chemical formulas and molecular structures she'd spent 15 years trying to forget. Agent Brennan had explained during the journey that the facility was officially designated as Research Station 7, a nondescript name for a place that didn't exist on any public maps. It was a fortress disguised as a corporate office park in rural Virginia, surrounded by triple-layer fencing, guard towers that looked like cell phone equipment, and enough firepower to repel a small army. Sarah felt the weight of it all as armed guards escorted her through security checkpoints that required retinal scans, fingerprint analysis, and clearance codes that changed every 60 seconds. They were preparing for war, and she was the ammunition. Dr. Elena Rodriguez met her in the main laboratory, a sprawling space filled with state-of-the-art equipment that made Sarah's old lab at Tecton look like a high school chemistry classroom. Rodriguez was 50-ish, with sharp eyes and the efficient manner of someone who'd spent decades in classified research. "Dr. Volkov," Rodriguez said, extending her hand. "I've read your published work, the papers you wrote before Tecton. Brilliant stuff. It's an honor, even under these circumstances." Sarah shook her hand, feeling like an imposter. "I haven't been Dr. Volkov in a long time." "Well, we need her back. My team and I are here to support you in any way possible. We have 3 biochemists, 2 weapons specialists, and an intelligence analyst who will be feeding us real-time updates on the terrorist cell's movements." Rodriguez gestured to the assembled team, young, eager faces that made Sarah feel ancient. "We have 5 days to do what would normally take 5 months. No pressure." Sarah managed a weak smile. No pressure at all. The first 18 hours were brutal. Sarah stood at a whiteboard the size of a wall, reconstructing VX7's molecular structure from memory. It came back in fragments: a base compound here, a stabilizing agent there, the delicate balance of elements that made the weapon both effective and controllable. Her hand moved across the board almost automatically, muscle memory from 15 years ago taking over. But with each formula she wrote, memories flooded back. Patricia Chen's voice explaining synthesis protocols. The small, windowless lab where they'd worked late nights, believing they were making the world safer. The moment Sarah had realized what they'd actually created, not a defensive countermeasure, but a perfect instrument of mass murder. "You're crying," Rodriguez said softly, appearing at her elbow with a bottle of water. Sarah touched her cheek, surprised to find it wet. "I didn't realize." "Take a break. You've been at this for 6 hours straight." "No time for breaks. People are dying in." She glanced at the countdown clock Rodriguez had mounted on the wall. 11 days, 6 hours and 32 minutes if we don't finish this. But Rodriguez physically took the marker from her hand. "You're no good to us if you collapse. Eat something. Sleep for 2 hours. Doctor's orders." Sarah wanted to argue, but her legs were shaking with exhaustion. She let Rodriguez guide her to a small room with a cot, and despite every intention to stay awake, she was unconscious within minutes. She dreamed of Patricia Chen's car going over the bridge, over and over, an endless loop of twisted metal and dark water. When she woke 3 hours later, her body ached and her mind felt clearer. She returned to the lab to find her team had continued her work, filling in gaps, checking her calculations. The VX7 formula was 90% complete. Day 2, they synthesized a small sample under maximum containment protocols. Sarah watched through reinforced glass as robotic arms carefully measured and combined compounds that could kill everyone in the building if a single seal failed. The compound materialized exactly as she remembered, a clear, odorless liquid that looked like water but was thousands of times more lethal than cyanide. Day 3, they began work on the detection method. Sarah designed a portable sensor that could identify particles in air samples down to parts per billion. The prototypes were rushed to FBI field teams in Chicago, Denver, and Houston. Day 4, the antidote. This was the hardest part, recreating the molecular key that could bind to and neutralize it in the human body. Sarah worked 23 hours straight, ignoring Rodriguez's protests, driven by the mental image of thousands of people dying because she'd been too slow, too tired, too damaged by her past to save them. At 11:47 p.m. on day 4, she had it. The antidote was synthesized, tested on lab samples, and proven effective. Production began immediately, enough doses to treat 50,000 people, with more being manufactured around the clock. Agent Brennan appeared in the lab doorway, his face drawn with exhaustion but his eyes bright with relief. "You did it. The detection sensors are already deployed. If Nassar tries to move his stockpile, we'll know." Sarah slumped against the lab bench, every muscle in her body screaming. "It's not over. They could have already positioned it. They could deploy before we find them." "Then we keep looking." Brennan handed her a tablet showing real-time surveillance of known associates of the purification front. "But you've given us a fighting chance. That's more than we had 5 days ago." Sarah was about to respond when Brennan's phone buzzed. He glanced at it, and his expression changed, hardening into something cold and alert. "What is it?" Sarah asked. "We've identified the source of VX7, the person who sold the original sample to the terrorists." Brennan pulled up a file on his tablet. A photograph appeared, a man in his 60s with silver hair and cold eyes that Sarah would recognize anywhere. Dr. Vincent Hale. Her former supervisor, Patricia's murderer, the man who'd been hunting her for 15 years. "He's been operating out of Azerbaijan under an alias," Brennan continued. "Intelligence intercepted communications between Hale and the Purification Front 48 hours ago. He knows we have you. He knows you've recreated the antidote." Sarah's blood ran cold. "Where is he now?" "That's the problem. He went dark 36 hours ago. We lost track." The lights went out. Emergency sirens wailed through the facility, bathing everything in pools of red. The lab's reinforced doors slammed shut automatically, magnetic locks engaging with heavy metallic thuds. "Breach," a voice screamed over the intercom. Breach in Sector 7. All personnel to secure positions. This is not a drill. Rodriguez grabbed Sarah's arm. The panic room now. But Sarah stood frozen, staring at Hale's photograph still glowing on Brennan's tablet. She'd spent 15 years running from this man, hiding from him, living in fear of the day he'd find her. That day had arrived. Brennan drew his weapon, his training taking over. "How many?" he barked into his radio. Static, then a panicked voice. "Unknown hostiles, heavily armed. They came through the east perimeter, sir. They knew exactly where to breach. This was planned. They have our..." Gunfire erupted somewhere in the facility, close enough that Sarah felt it in her chest. "They're coming for me," Sarah whispered. Brennan met her eyes, his expression grim. "Then we make sure they don't leave alive." More gunfire, closer now. The sound of boots running through corridors shouted commands, the chaos of a facility under siege. Through the reinforced glass window of the lab, Sarah saw figures moving through the smoke-filled hallway. 5, maybe 6 armed men in tactical gear, moving with military precision toward the laboratory. And behind them, walking calmly through the carnage like he was strolling through a park, was Dr. Vincent Hale. He looked older than his photograph, but his eyes were the same, cold, calculating, devoid of anything resembling human empathy. He saw Sarah through the glass and smiled. It was the smile of a predator who'd finally cornered his prey. "Hello, Sarah," Hale said, his voice amplified through the facility's compromised intercom system. "Did you really think you could hide from me forever? Did you think your little antidote would matter?" He raised a small cylinder, no bigger than a spray paint can. "I have right here, enough to kill everyone in this facility in 6 minutes. You're going to open that door, walk out here, and come with me quietly. Or I'm going to kill every person in this building, and then I'm going to kill everyone in your precious little Montana town, starting with the diner owner. Rosa, wasn't it?" Sarah's world narrowed to that cylinder in Hale's hand. All her work, all her sacrifice, meaningless if he deployed it here. Brennan grabbed her shoulder. "Don't, he's bluffing. He killed Patricia. He'll kill everyone here without blinking." Sarah moved toward the door controls. "Sarah, no." But she was already disengaging the magnetic locks. The door hissed open, and Dr. Sarah Volkov stepped out to face the monster from her past. Sarah stepped through the doorway into the smoke-filled corridor, her hands raised, her heart hammering against her ribs. Behind her, she heard Brennan's sharp intake of breath, Rodriguez's whispered protest. But she kept walking toward the man who'd murdered her mentor, destroyed her life, and now threatened everything she'd fought to protect. Dr. Vincent Hale stood 20 feet away, the cylinder of VX-7 held casually in his right hand like a soda can. His tactical team had their weapons trained on the lab, on Brennan, on anyone who might try to be a hero. Hale looked exactly like she remembered, distinguished, professorial, the kind of man you'd trust to teach your children, evil wearing a respectable face. "There she is," Hale said, his voice carrying the same warm tone he'd used 15 years ago when praising her research. "My brilliant protege. Do you know how long I've been looking for you, Sarah? How many resources I've expended tracking down every lead, every rumor?" 15 years, Sarah said, stopping 10 feet away from him, close enough to see the madness in his eyes. "You've been hunting me for 15 years because I'm the only one who knew the truth about what you were doing." "The truth," Hale laughed, a sound without humor. "The truth is that you were naive, you and Patricia both. You actually believed we were working for the government, for defense, for the noble cause of protecting America." He shook his head like a disappointed teacher. "The real money, Sarah, has always been in selling to the highest bidder. Nations, corporations, revolutionary groups, they all need weapons, and they pay extraordinary sums for the very best. You killed Patricia. I eliminated a security risk, just like I'm going to eliminate you." Hale's grip tightened on the cylinder. But first, you're going to answer some questions. The antidote you developed, I need the complete formula." Sarah felt a cold clarity settle over her. This was it. The moment 15 years of running had been leading toward. No more hiding, no more fear. "Why would I give you anything?" she asked. "Because if you don't, I'll release this compound right now. Everyone in this facility dies within minutes. Then I'll drive to that charming little town of yours, Millbrook, Montana, and I'll release another cylinder in the diner during lunch rush. Rosa Martinez, Tommy Brewster, that apprentice kid Tyler, all of them, dead because you were too stubborn to cooperate." Behind Hale, Sarah saw movement in the smoke. Brennan's team flanking through the corridors, but they couldn't risk shooting with the VX-7 cylinder in play. One bullet, one wrong move, and everyone died. She needed to buy them time. "The antidote formula is complex," Sarah said, forcing her voice to remain steady. "I can't just recite it. I need to write it down, show you the synthesis process." "Don't insult my intelligence. You memorized it, just like you memorized everything else." Hale raised the cylinder slightly. "Start talking or I start killing." Sarah's mind raced through possibilities. The cylinder was small, maybe 3 ounces of VX-7, enough to kill everyone in the immediate area but not the entire facility if they could seal the sectors fast enough. Hale's tactical team was professional but not military. She could see it in their spacing, their trigger discipline. Private contractors, probably expensive ones. And Hale himself was 63 years old, physically fit but not trained for combat. He was a scientist playing soldier, relying on hired muscle and the threat of his weapon. He'd made one critical mistake. He assumed Sarah was still the frightened young researcher who'd run 15 years ago. But Sarah Mitchell, the woman who'd spent 12 years practicing combat in a Montana garage, who'd survived alone, who'd built a life from nothing, she was someone different. "You want the antidote formula," Sarah said. "Fine, it starts with a base compound." She moved. 15 years of muscle memory and 12 years of nightly training compressed into 2 seconds of explosive action. Sarah lunged forward, her left hand striking Hale's wrist in a precise blow that targeted the nerve cluster. The cylinder flew from his grip, arcing through the air. Time seemed to slow. Sarah saw Brennan diving forward, his hands outstretched, the cylinder spinning end over end. Hale's shocked expression, his tactical team swinging their weapons toward her. Brennan caught the cylinder inches before it hit the concrete floor. And then everything happened at once. Gunfire erupted as FBI agents poured from the side corridors. Hale's contractors returned fire, the hallway exploding into chaos. Sarah dropped and rolled, her body moving on pure instinct, finding cover behind an overturned equipment cart. Hale was running, trying to escape through the smoke. Sarah saw him disappear around a corner and felt something primal surge through her, not fear but rage. 15 years of running, Patricia's death, the thousands of people who would have died if Hale had succeeded. She wasn't letting him escape. Sarah sprinted after him, ignoring Brennan's shouted warnings. She'd trained for this. Every night in her garage, every punch thrown at shadows, every kick practiced in solitude, it had all been preparation for this moment. She found Hale in a stairwell, trying to descend to a lower level. He heard her coming and turned, pulling a pistol from inside his jacket. His hands shook, the scientist forced to do his own killing. "Don't," he warned, aiming at her chest. "I will shoot you." "Then shoot," Sarah said, still advancing. The gunshot was deafening in the enclosed space. Sarah felt the bullet pass within inches of her head, felt the heat of it, but she didn't stop. Hale fired again, missed again, his hands trembling with adrenaline and fear. By the time he tried for a third shot, Sarah was on him. She struck his gun hand, the weapon clattering down the stairs. Hale threw a clumsy punch that Sarah blocked easily. He was strong for his age, but he fought like an academic, all upper body, no technique, relying on size and desperation. Sarah fought like someone who had everything to lose. She drove her elbow into his solar plexus, knocking the wind from his lungs. As he doubled over, she grabbed his collar and slammed him against the concrete wall. "This is for Patricia," she said, her voice cold. Hale's eyes went wide with fear, real fear, the kind he'd never experienced when he was the one in control. "Wait, Sarah, we can make a deal." No deals, no more running, no more death. Brennan and his team thundered into the stairwell, weapons drawn. Dr. Volkov stepped back. But Sarah held Hale against the wall, her forearm across his throat, watching him gasp for air. She could kill him, right now. End 15 years of nightmares with one final act of violence. Instead, she stepped back and let Brennan's agents swarm forward, cuffing Hale with movements so practiced they looked choreographed. "Vincent Hale," Brennan said formally, "you're under arrest for conspiracy to commit terrorism, murder, and about 40 other charges that'll ensure you die in prison." As they dragged him away, Hale looked back at Sarah, his face twisted with impotent rage. "This isn't over. The Purification Front still has VX-7. They'll still attack. You haven't won anything." "Maybe not," Sarah said quietly, "but you've lost." 2 hours later, Sarah sat in a debriefing room, wrapped in a shock blanket despite the room being perfectly warm. Her hands shook as she held a cup of coffee she couldn't seem to drink. Brennan sat across from her, a tablet showing a live operation in progress. "Chicago," he said. "The detection sensors identified particles in a warehouse on the south side. FBI hostage rescue team went in 30 minutes ago. They found 3 cylinders and arrested 4 members of the Purification Front, including Ahmed Nassar." Sarah closed her eyes, relief washing over her like a wave. "Your antidote, your detection method, your work, it saved thousands of lives." Brennan leaned forward. "More importantly, you survived. Hale is in custody. The terrorist cell is neutralized. It's over, Dr. Volkov." "Is it?" Sarah asked. "Is it really over?" Brennan was quiet for a moment. "The Justice Department has formally granted you full immunity. Your identity as Sarah Mitchell is now legally recognized. You're free to return to Millbrook, resume your life. We'll station agents nearby for a few months, just as a precaution, but the immediate threat is eliminated." Free, the word felt foreign, impossible. Sarah thought about Millbrook, about Rosa and Tyler and Tommy Brewster, and all the people who'd stood by her even after learning the truth. She thought about her garage, her apartment above Main Street, the mountains she could see from her bedroom window. "Home. When can I leave?" she asked. Brennan smiled. "There's a helicopter fueled and ready whenever you are." Sarah stood, letting the shock blanket fall away. She'd walked into this facility 5 days ago as a woman running from her past. She was leaving as someone who'd finally made peace with it. "Take me home," she said. The helicopter touched down in a field outside Millbrook 3 weeks after Sarah had left. 3 weeks that felt like 3 lifetimes. She'd spent the first week in debriefing sessions, answering questions from Justice Department officials, intelligence analysts, and counterterrorism experts. The second week had been devoted to testimony, sealed proceedings where she detailed everything about Tecton Defense Systems, Vincent Hale's criminal enterprise, and the 15 years she'd spent in hiding. The third week she'd simply rested, really rested for the first time in 15 years. No go bag by the door, no weapon under her pillow, no constant vigilance scanning for threats in every shadow. Hale was in federal custody, facing charges that would keep him imprisoned for multiple lifetimes. The Purification Front had been dismantled, 7 members arrested, their stockpile of VX-7 secured and destroyed. The threat was over. And now finally she was going home. Agent Brennan had insisted on accompanying her, along with 2 other agents who would be stationed near Millbrook for the next 6 months. "Just a precaution," he'd said, though they both knew the real danger had passed. The FBI was being thorough, protecting their asset, but more than that, Brennan had become something like a friend during the ordeal. He'd seen her at her worst and never wavered in his belief that she could save thousands of lives. Sarah stepped out of the helicopter into crisp November air that smelled like pine and early snow. The Montana landscape stretched before her in endless shades of gold and gray, the mountains standing sentinel in the distance. She'd forgotten how beautiful it was, or maybe she'd never let herself truly see it, too focused on survival to appreciate the life she'd built. A convoy of pickup trucks was parked along the access road. Sarah's throat tightened as she recognized the vehicles: Tommy Brewster's Ford, Mayor Hartley's Silverado, the Johnsons' battered Dodge. And leading them all, Rosa Martinez's vintage Bronco with the faded paint and the bumper sticker that read Montana, where men are men and sheep are nervous. Rosa was the first out, striding across the field with her characteristic no-nonsense determination. She reached Sarah and pulled her into a bone-crushing hug before Sarah could say a word. 3 weeks, Rosa said, her voice muffled against Sarah's shoulder. 3 weeks without a single word except Brennan's cryptic "everything's fine" updates. Do you have any idea how worried we were? I'm sorry, Sarah whispered. I couldn't call, security protocols. I know, classified government nonsense. Rosa pulled back, gripping Sarah's shoulders and studying her face. You look terrible. Sarah laughed, surprised by the sound. Thanks, Rosa, really feeling the love. You also look free. Rosa's eyes were bright with tears. Really, truly free, for the first time since I've known you. And Sarah realized it was true. The weight she'd carried for 15 years, the constant fear, the guilt, the certainty that her past would eventually destroy her future, all of it had lifted. She wasn't Dr. Sarah Volkov, fugitive scientist, anymore. She wasn't Sarah Mitchell, woman with a fake identity and a hidden past. She was just Sarah, complete, imperfect, and finally whole. The others approached more cautiously. Tommy Brewster with his shy smile and his wife Linda holding his hand. Mayor Hartley looking gruff but relieved. The Johnsons, old Pete Martinez, and Tyler Chen hanging back from the group, his expression uncertain. Sarah walked directly to Tyler, watching the 19-year-old try to maintain his composure. The garage, she asked. Tyler straightened, pride evident despite his nervousness. 42 jobs completed. No complaints. Well, Mrs. Henderson complained about the invoice, but Mrs. Henderson complains about everything, so that's normal. Made enough to cover utilities and supplies with a little left over. You kept my business running for 3 weeks while dealing with federal agents, and probably half the town asking you questions you couldn't answer. 21 days, actually, but who's counting? Tyler's attempt at humor wavered. Sarah, I didn't know what you'd done before, who you were, and I've been thinking about what you said at the meeting about creating weapons and people dying in. Tyler, Sarah put her hand on his shoulder. I taught you how to rebuild an engine, how to diagnose problems by sound, how to treat every customer's vehicle like it's the most important job in the world. That's who I am now. The past. That's something I'm learning to live with, not something I'm proud of, but it doesn't change what I tried to teach you. You taught me that everyone deserves a second chance, Tyler said quietly. That's what you gave me when everyone else in this town thought I was just another dropout loser. So yeah, the garage is running, and it'll keep running as long as you need it to. Sarah pulled him into a hug, this kid she'd mentored, who'd grown into someone honorable and strong. Over his shoulder, she saw the rest of Millbrook's welcoming committee watching with various expressions of relief and joy. All right, Mayor Hartley announced, breaking the emotional moment with practiced efficiency. Let's get you back to town proper. Rosa's made enough food to feed an army, and half the county's waiting at the diner. The convoy back to Millbrook felt like a parade. Cars lined Main Street, people standing on sidewalks, waving and calling out greetings. Sarah sat in Rosa's Bronco, overwhelmed by the outpouring of support. These people knew everything now, her real identity, her past crimes, the weapon she'd created, the 15 years of lies. And they'd chosen to forgive it all, to welcome her home anyway. The Welcome Home Sarah banner stretched across Main Street was at least 30 feet long, clearly handmade, with signatures covering every inch of fabric. Rosa pulled to a stop in front of the diner, where what looked like half the town had gathered. Sarah stepped out into chaos, people calling her name, pressing forward to shake her hand or hug her, asking questions about where she'd been and what had happened. It was overwhelming in the best possible way, this proof that she'd built something real in Millbrook, something that couldn't be erased by revelations about her past. Agent Brennan hung back with his team, giving her space but maintaining a watchful presence. Sarah caught his eye and mouthed, "Thank you." He nodded once, understanding everything that phrase contained. Inside Rosa's diner, tables had been pushed together to form one long communal surface covered in food, meatloaf and mashed potatoes, Rosa's famous apple pie, green bean casserole, fresh bread, and enough coffee to caffeinate the entire state. Sarah found herself seated at the center, surrounded by familiar faces, feeling more at home than she had in her entire life. Mayor Hartley stood and tapped his glass for attention. The diner fell quiet. Sarah Mitchell, or Sarah Volkov, or whoever the hell you want to be called, has been part of this community for 12 years. She's fixed our vehicles, taught our children, volunteered her time, and generally been a model citizen despite apparently being a fugitive criminal genius the whole time. Laughter rippled through the crowd. 3 weeks ago, she left to help the FBI stop a terrorist attack. We didn't know if she'd come back. We didn't know if she'd survive, but she did both because Sarah's a lot tougher than she looks. Hartley raised his glass. To Sarah, welcome home. Don't ever scare us like that again. To Sarah, the room chorused, glasses raised. Sarah felt tears streaming down her face and didn't bother to wipe them away. She'd cried more in the past 3 weeks than in the previous 15 years combined, but these tears were different. Not fear or grief or exhaustion, but gratitude so profound it had nowhere else to go. After the meal, after the speeches and stories and too much pie, Sarah finally made it back to her apartment above the garage. Tyler had kept it clean, but it still smelled like home, motor oil and coffee, and the specific mustiness of old buildings in small towns. She walked through the rooms, touching familiar objects, her worn couch, the landscape painting on the wall, the kitchen counter where she'd eaten 1,000 lonely dinners, the bedroom window that looked out over Main Street and the mountains beyond. The hidden compartment in her closet stood open. Tyler must have found it during the week she was gone. The go bag was gone, probably confiscated by the FBI as evidence. Sarah felt a pang of loss, then realized it was relief. She didn't need it anymore. She pulled out her phone, a new one provided by the FBI, secured and encrypted, and found a message from Agent Brennan waiting. Official FBI threat assessment, you're safe. Unofficial personal opinion, you did good, Dr. Volkov. Really good. Enjoy your second chance. You earned it. Sarah smiled and typed back, it's just Sarah, and thank you for everything. She set the phone down and walked to her bedroom window. Outside, Millbrook was settling into its evening rhythm, lights coming on in houses, the diner closing for the night, Tommy Brewster walking his dog past the garage, right on schedule, normal, predictable, safe. But now Sarah could see it differently, not as a hiding place or a temporary refuge, but as home. These people knew who she was, all of who she was, and they'd chosen to love her anyway. She thought about Dr. Patricia Chen, her mentor who died trying to do the right thing. Patricia would be proud, Sarah thought. Proud that her protege had finally stopped running, had faced her past, and had saved thousands of lives in the process. A knock on her door interrupted her thoughts. Sarah opened it to find Rosa standing there with 2 mugs of coffee. Figured you might want company, Rosa said, or I can leave you alone if you need space. Sarah stepped back, welcoming her friend inside. They sat together on the worn couch, drinking coffee in comfortable silence as darkness fell over Millbrook. "It's really over," Rosa asked finally. "No more running, no more secrets." "It's really over," Sarah confirmed. "The threat's eliminated, Hale's in prison. I'm free legally, officially free, to live as Sarah Mitchell, former chemical engineer turned small-town mechanic." "So what happens now?" Sarah thought about it. The garage downstairs needed new equipment. She'd promised to teach the advanced auto mechanics class at the high school starting in January. Mrs. Henderson's Buick probably needed another oil change. Life, in other words. Normal, beautiful, ordinary life. "Now," Sarah said, smiling at her friend, "now I get to work on that transmission Tyler mentioned. Now I get to live in a place where people know my name and my history and care about me anyway. Now I get to stop surviving and start actually living." Rosa clinked her coffee mug against Sarah's. "Welcome home, Sarah, for real this time." Through the window, Sarah could see the mountains silhouetted against the darkening sky, solid and eternal. She'd come to Montana 15 years ago as a fugitive, running from her past and certain she'd never find peace. But she'd been wrong. Peace wasn't something you found by running away. It was something you built, one day at a time, in a small town where everyone knew your name and your secrets and chose to love you anyway. Sarah Mitchell, Dr. Sarah Volkov, was finally truly home. And tomorrow, she'd wake up in her apartment above the garage, make terrible coffee, and get back to work fixing engines and teaching kids and living the quiet, extraordinary life of an ordinary person who'd done something heroic. The deadly secret was no longer hidden. The black SUVs had come and gone. The past had been confronted and conquered. And the future was here in Millbrook, Montana, stretching out before her like those endless mountain horizons, wide open, full of possibility and finally, blessedly free. The end.